Welcome to Seeking Alpha Editors Roundtable, what moved markets this week for the week ending December 10th, a week marked by big rallies at the start of the week. S&P, Dow, and Nasdaq up several percentage points in the first 3 days of the week alone. Then markets took their breath a little bit in anticipation of today's inflation report, the CPI report, which came in basically pretty much exactly in line with expectations. And as we record this at noon on Friday, stocks are up a bit for the day, but up handily for the week. And here to discuss that with me are my colleagues from the Seeking Alpha Editors Pool, whom I will introduce now in no particular order. Kim Kahn, Senior News Editor, Jerry Cronenberg, Director of News, Stephen Alfers, Senior Managing Editor of News, and I'm your host and moderator, Nathaniel E. Baker, Senior Editor of Strategic Contributors. So let's start with Kim to give us the big picture overview of what moved markets this week.
Well, it looks like we're going to fix out the week kind of quietly today, judging by the trading as we record this around midday. But it was a kind of fast and furious start to the week. You had the biggest 2-day gains for the S&P and the Nasdaq since March, and the rally is kind of fueled by some preliminary lab results from Pfizer and BioNTech saying that they can neutralize the Omicron virus with their vaccine in these early tests. It was enough to have a relief rally that kind of benefited both cyclicals and the growth stocks, and also brought rates back from below 1.4% where they were last week. Now they're pushing up over 1.5% for the 10-year. So we had a really big economic data point today with the CPI coming in headline number at 6.8%. That's the biggest, fastest pace since 1982. And the core is bumping up against 5%. It was at 4.9%, biggest since the early 90s. So we're seeing some historical inflation numbers, but market reaction pretty good.
Yes, although it was still the highest inflation print since 1982. Which is probably well before many of our viewers and listeners were even born. Stephen, I'm not going to mention when you were born because I don't know, but I suspect it was before then, but I'll leave that alone. But you, what were you watching this week?
Yeah, I mean, the inflation numbers, there's a lot to unpack there. I said a month ago on this show that the inflation numbers were disastrous for both from the politicians in DC and for monetary, like the Biden administration, plus the monetary officials like the Fed, because they're gonna need to action on it, or at least the appearance of action on it. This month's numbers were no better. I agree with what the Biden administration said and what Kim just said. The gasoline is a big part of it, and that should ease off a little bit. So maybe the headlines won't be so bad in coming months. I think gasoline prices are up 58% year over year. They obviously can't continue at that pace forever, I wouldn't think.
Jerry, our new man in charge and covering the newest issue market, basically SPACs and IPOs. Interesting to keep a gauge on that to kind of monitor the direction of retail investors and others. So what are you watching there?
Well, we had an interesting week there. And as I've said before, this is really the cherry on the top of the bull market, right? That IPOs are a good indicator of when you're market topping. And I see more evidence that we are, because some things do well and some things do poorly. Nubank, a very important Latin American, what's called neobank, had a great IPO this week. As we're talking now, it popped 36%. That's first day. As we're talking now, it's about 22% up net, had a little bit of a pullback. So had a great day. On the other side of the coin, BuzzFeed, the media company, had a terrible opening after going public via a SPAC. First of all, about 95% of these SPACs, shareholders redeemed their cash. They said, no thanks, we don't want BuzzFeed. The stock tanked. As we're talking now, the stock's down about 40% since going public on Monday. So clearly a selective market for SPACs and IPOs. More indication macro, as far as I'm concerned, of a topping process for the market in general.
Interesting. Okay, let's move on to the second segment of the show where we discuss our favorite stories, Seeking Alpha articles, tweets, or other things that we have come across in our travels. And let's start with Kim.
Well, B of A was out with a note today, its flow show note, and an interesting comparison saying now the Nasdaq right now is trading kind of like it was in 2000, 2001, right after the bubble pop for the dot-com boom. And it's drawing some comparisons there and saying, basically, it's time to sell the rips because on its way down from 5,000 to 1,100 post dot-com bubble, the Nasdaq had about 11 instances where it rallied 10% or more. So there's going to be these spikes that you're going to see, but it's recommending settling those when you get them.
Interesting. The topping process, I wonder if that will be a phrase that we start hearing about more into year end and early next year. Stephen, what about you?
My favorite story was one done by our financial editor, Liz Quiche, this morning on Goldman Sachs. As we know, for years, Goldman has culled kind of its worst performing bankers, 5% of its worst performing bankers each year. They just let them go in late December, early January, and they're not going to be doing that this year because there's such a labor shortage out there. There's such a need for talent. Deal making is still at an incredibly high level.
And Jerry, what about you?
Well, I'm watching something that's really probably not getting as much attention as it should, which is the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Joe Biden talked to the president of Russia, Mr. Putin, this week. There are 100,000 Russian troops on the Ukraine border. That's not a really good sign. We've got some great coverage about this from our reporters and our columnists. If we wake up one morning in the next few days and there are Russian tanks in Ukraine and Vladimir Putin is giving a speech about how they have reunited, we're going to have a big problem, I believe, for stocks around the world. I think Europe would drop. That would take American stocks down. Oil and gas, I think, will shoot up, which has some positives if you own them, but some negatives in various other industries. So I think it's not really getting the attention that it should, and I think it's quite a risk factor.
Yeah. And Russia has done stuff in the region before. You know, they invaded Georgia, gosh, maybe 10 years. I can't even remember when.
Yeah,
and they was that when it was, and they annexed Crimea, right?
Right.
That was probably, I think, about 10 years ago, and basically got away with it, right? So
right.
We'll see. Yeah, potential hot spot in the globe. Yet another one, I guess, along with the South China Sea and a couple of others. So, and for me, I'll go once again back to the pro section of the Seeking Alpha website. This is the most curated content, the most timely articles that we send out to subscribers. And we came across one here by Jay Mintzmeyer, author of The Value Investor's Edge. And he has a bullish piece on Danaos Corporation, stock symbol DAC. They are a container shipping company, which is different from the other types of shipping companies, and in ways that are pretty interesting that he gets into in this article, not as closely tied to the economic cycle. And these container shippers have sold off, especially Danaos, over the last couple of months after a strong first 6 months of the year. And he says this is a time to buy. He has a price target of about $110 a share. It's currently around 71. So that's more than 50% upside. So I recommend people check that out. It's called Danaos Corp, cash flow machine, primed for 50% plus breakout. And with that concludes our segment this week. Thank you for listening or watching, as the case may be. If you want to watch the video, please do so. It airs on Friday afternoon, starting at 4 p.m. on the seekingalpha.com website. The slightly longer audio version goes live on Saturday morning around 6:30 a.m. You get that by subscribing to the Wall Street Breakfast account. And with that, we wish you a happy and healthy weekend and look forward to speaking to you again next week.